Are digital sales really sales at all?
And as a result, are we being ripped off? Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award winning tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading tech journalists and commentators to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined as usual by Adam Turner. Hey, Adam, great news. Kiss has announced that it's becoming an all digital avatar based band using the same technology that ABBA did for its virtual avatar Voyage show. My question to you, Adam, is should Gene Simmons indeed be allowed to rock and roll all night and into eternity?
ABBA fans might lap up this kind of thing, but the Kiss Army won't stand for it. There's no way they're going to pay top dollar for a pale imitation.
But the Kiss Army will be just all digital as well. I mean, inevitably, this will lead to Kiss Total War.
I guess so. I was going to say the Kiss Army's got a few miles on the clock at this point in time. Maybe they can't make it to the gigs anyway.
I suppose that's true. We're also joined by a man who I suspect has woken up more than once in Detroit Rock City. From ABC Shepparton, it's Nick Healey.
I've just realised that ABBA completely lost the opportunity to call them avatars, and I'm really,
They
really
did not
annoyed
lose
about
that
that.
opportunity.
They
That
did
is
call
what
them
they are
avatars?
called, Vic.
All right,
Oh.
good.
They did call
Thank you.
them avatars.
Thank you. I'm obviously not up with my ABBA news. Very nice to be back with you, even though I'm not one of Australia's leading technology journalists or commentators, but happy to be along for the ride.
Well, while you are along for the ride, Nick, I know you're a man who's passionate about live music. Is a Kiss digital avatar concert really live music?
No, but that doesn't mean it can't be enjoyable. I mean, if we can get concerts in Fortnite, Kiss can go and do their crazy thing. And actually, when we talk about those older bands still trying to get that sound going, if anyone's gone and seen someone who's on that sort of, grey nomad tour at the stage of their career, it can be a little disappointing. But I think
Mm.
Kiss has kind of circumvented that. I'm not a huge Kiss fan, but I'd give one of these a go. I would.
Well, all this talk of digital Kiss is actually really appropriate to our main theme this week because we want to talk about digital goods in a broader fashion. Because you can buy all sorts of entertainment these days in purely digital form, whether it's books or music or video, for example. And in theory, it's far more permanent than, buying an old cassette tape, a worn out paperback, or a VHS tape. But not always. Adam, what's Sony been doing in the US to make us think twice about the whole digital economy?
Well, a lot of PlayStation users got a bit of a shock when Sony told them that due to content licensing arrangements, they wouldn't be able to watch Discovery content that they'd purchased. And that's hundreds of shows, 1,300 seasons worth of shows from the Discovery Network. And what's more, they were actually pulling it out of the library as of the 31st of December. So they were basically reaching into your home and going, yoink, you can't have that anymore. And they're not even reimbursing them for it. No refunds,
And this
no backsies. Sorry, we're just taking that stuff that you paid for
and
and
this was
thought you
content
owned.
they'd purchased. This wasn't like a streaming
Yes,
subscription.
they
This was
thought they
I bought this
owned
show.
it. Yeah, they thought they owned it. They paid for the rights. They thought it was theirs, but apparently it's not.
Nick, do you reckon that's reasonable?
No, absolutely not. It wouldn't pass any pub test in any pub in any city in all of Australia or around the world. It's shocking stuff. But unfortunately, it's not the first time we've heard tales like this. This is probably a particularly bad one. I mean, when we look at the entirety of that Discovery catalogue, this isn't about, as Adam was saying, this isn't just turning off the pipe of streaming. This is taking away something that you were under the impression you owned. And it goes back to a mantra that's been a long time shouted from the rooftops. You don't own your digital media. You think you do, but you don't. Unless you are downloading it yourself, storing it on some random server, air gapping that server, you don't own it.
And even then, you'd have to have the rights to do that. If you're
Exactly.
getting it from your provider, you don't own it. because of the licensing agreement that you probably blithely clicked through because you were more keen to watch, I don't know, episodes of Mythbusters or something.
Well, also because the average licensing agreement goes for so long, you'd be still waiting to watch season 5 of Mythbusters after you read the whole thing. Like these things are too long, deliberately so, to be understood.
Part of the problem here, I think, is that Warner Brothers, which is this huge behemoth of which owns all kinds of things these days, it looks like they're trying to hoard all the Discovery content to feed it into HBO Max. So these end users are at the mercy of some corporate giants fighting over, no, hang on, you can't have that anymore because we only want to offer it exclusively over here. Yet somehow being able to retrospectively say, not only offer it exclusively in the future, but also in the past. So we're going to go back and change time and say you're not allowed to have that anymore.
But that's where we've been for a long time now. I mean, I think it's really telling that about the time we started calling our TVs, our movies, our games, our music, when we started calling it content and not
Mm.
regarding it with any more value than that, that gave us an idea of where those large companies were going. It's been completely devalued. And, it's a funny thing. I got rid of a lot of physical media a long time ago, but there was stuff I kept, and I didn't only keep it out of nostalgia. I kept a lot out of nostalgia, but some of it because I knew it was unlikely to ever turn up on those streaming services when I wanted to watch it. This is that writ large. You would have thought that your discovery content would have been available to you until you were bored of it, or we stopped watching TV. But here we are, and it's going to keep happening. This won't be the only time this is going to occur for people.
The US commentator Cory Doctorow has a term for this: "inshitification" of the internet.
And he's on the
This
money.
this idea, yeah, this idea that initially you hook people in with what seems like a very appealing proposition because a digital copy is easier. You don't have to, get up and put the disc in the thing or the tape in the thing, taking it even further back. But over time, it gets worse and worse, and people are kind of stuck in these silos anyway.
It's a completely perfect term, and I got to say, I genuinely think Oxford Dictionary missed a trick when it didn't give enshittification the word of the year. We see it over and over again. It's when it comes to content, when it comes to licensing agreements, I think that's when you notice it most strongly. But you'll see it in digital offerings. We've seen it come through in social media platforms as well. This is probably one of the rawest examples of it that we've seen for a long time.
And really, if you were going to expect it from anyone, you'd expect it from Sony because they have got form. They've been when it comes to oppressive digital rights management and dodgy activities, it's hard to look past Sony.
I'm sorry, I used to enjoy the way my Sony Blu-ray player would take 4 hours to load a Blu-ray after it got through all of the rights management software. That was part of the joy.
And did you enjoy the rootkit that the Sony CDs installed on your PC back in the day?
I'd actually forgotten about that, but that was a huge deal for a long time.
It was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Sony put stuff on CDs to stop people from copying the CDs, but they used, no, sorry, not just that, but it then copied itself onto your computer.
Hmm.
And they used a way to hide that on the computer so you couldn't tell it was there. And it's the same tools that hackers use to hide things on computers. So once they'd done that, your computer was then more vulnerable to someone else coming along and hiding something there and stealing your data, whatever was going on. So basically, Sony just hacked all of their paying customers just because maybe they might be criminals.
And do not get me wrong, I do believe that there is a need for concern around piracy. I really do. From my
Mm,
angle, it's making sure that artists get paid for their art. I
mm.
don't particularly care about the big studios making more money. I want the people who are actually making that art getting paid for it. But we've found ways to make that work in the past. Not to out you gentlemen, but we all remember shareware back in the day where you had to cut someone a check for $20 and put it in an envelope, and people made good money out of that. There are ways that we have
Let us not
found
forget Doom became huge because of shareware.
you can make money
It's
out of the people who want to pay you for what you do without forcing it down someone's throat. Or the flip side of it, deciding that, rights are better off on a bottom line on a spreadsheet than someone's actual capacity to watch them. And here's where we end up with Discovery.
And I mean, this is complex as well. Getting back to the Sony CD thing, there's another issue there, of course, because CDs in Australia, not that too many people buy them. I've recently had a great deal of difficulty with a print CD that I was trying to buy from Warner Music. I'm still cranky about that. But
Shakes fist.
yeah, totally. Shakes
Oh, yeah,
fist in
good,
air.
good.
CDs are one of those few areas where, as Australians, we've actually got a right to do that kind of content conversion and ripping of CD based music. It's one of the few digital formats, in fact, that we're allowed to do that with. You don't have that right with games. You don't have that right with DVDs or Blu ray. You technically did have that right. It's the one area where VHS was superior, as long as it didn't actually have, I've forgotten because it's been such a long time, but that horrible copy protection they started putting on them. As long as it
Macrovision.
didn't have Macrovision, that's the
You
Yeah.
could
stuff.
buy things to strip off the Macrovision.
Allegedly, you could.
So I
Allegedly,
heard.
yes.
Allegedly.
Yeah,
Not that I
threw
could
that,
see one
threw
in a
that guy down
box
the
from
pub.
where I'm sitting. No.
But as long as it didn't actually have that, you were allowed to
Yeah.
format shift a VHS. If you had a VHS copy of, I'm trying to think of something contemporary, of Cliffhanger, you could shift that to digital and still own it and watch it now in terrible VHS quality. Got a DVD or Blu-ray of it? No. Bought a digital copy of it? No. And, I pity you because Cliffhanger's awful, although apparently they're making a sequel. So what do I know?
Did not know that.
You probably didn't need to know that. Let's be honest here.
No, I did not know that about VHS. That's actually really interesting to get a sense of where we've gone with our own rights management and the right to the media that we've owned. It does feel like it's been a real slip back. And I don't know. Look, I'm getting nostalgic for the first time I learned how to break the region lock on a DVD player now. But we've always had ways of diving around things, but we shouldn't have had to. You should feel comfortable that if you have bought a movie, a season, a CD, or an album, maybe even just a single, that you own it. And we've lost that a long time ago.
And the studios had their own ways around this. I mean, Nick, you would remember, of course, the way that DVDs were meant to work digitally via ultraviolet. Tell me about ultraviolet.
Now, if I remember, and you are throwing me back here, ultraviolet was when you bought your physical copy on either DVD or Blu-ray, it also gave you the license for a digital copy that you could get through your ultraviolet vault. It was meant to be a whole bunch of platforms would come on board and support the ultraviolet format. How long did it last? 2 years before it got
Yeah,
remade?
it
3
died in the
years?
ass.
Something like
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Yeah.
Very badly. I think I've still got a couple of things that were once on ultraviolet. But that was innovative on some level. It said, own the physical media, but still have the convenience of getting it digitally. It just wasn't super convenient, unfortunately, when it actually came down to it. It was maybe ahead of its time.
But part of the reason why it failed in Australia is the studios didn't support it. They put it all on the retailers. They expected the JB Hi-Fis and people of the world to set up all the streaming infrastructure. Might have worked in the US when you had Walmart and people like that. It just didn't work here. But at least they had the decency as each one of them went out of business to say, actually, if you go over to Flickster or whatever it is and punch in a code, you can take the movie across. So they didn't yoink it in the way that Sony's yoinking this stuff.
That is interesting because I do seem to vaguely recall some of those emails ages ago. I wasn't particularly worried, and I don't think I actioned them. But it's a really good point, Adam. Like, this didn't have to go this way. People have
Yes.
paid money for this, not just set up a subscription. I think people should be outraged. I'm really surprised. Maybe surprised. I'm surprised Sony think that this isn't going to cop a backlash to them, or maybe they've just decided that it's worth it, even with the backlash.
Or maybe they don't have a choice, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, exactly.
That's a possibility.
I don't want to be the guy who defends Sony, all right? I don't want that on my tombstone. But maybe in this circumstances that, Warner Brothers played hardball and there was nothing they could do about it. Or Warner Brothers asked for $1 bazillion, and so they had to say no.
Mm.
And I mean, this also goes across, whilst this was a video thing, this also goes across the kind of gaming space as
Oh, yeah.
well. And Nick, we've seen the huge rise in much more subscription based gaming, things like Microsoft Game Pass is, I suppose, the classic. But should we be treating other digital game purchases, Nintendo eShop and PlayStation Network, and I mean, PlayStation's got their version of Game Pass now as well. Should we just be treating all of those as though they were subscriptions and could vanish at any time?
Well, they have. I mean, from memory, it was Wii U. Their marketplace went away. If anyone was still using that, I'm pretty sure it went the same way for the 3DS. We've actually seen it
Mhm.
already happen. I don't buy a lot of games anymore, and I don't just mean physically. I'm subscribed to both, the Xbox subscription model and the PlayStation subscription model, and they kind of feed in. Honestly, the amount of time I get to game these days, I'm happy just to wait for it to arrive on one of those rather than racing out to grab a copy of it. I'd probably buy maybe one game a year at the moment. But again, I have to know if I'm buying them through the eShops, I don't own them unless I've physically walked into a JB. And what is it these days? Is there even a disc anymore? Am I just buying a box that's got a code in it anyway?
I think half the time you are just
Yeah.
buying a box with a code in it.
Depends on the platform. And in some ways it's irrelevant for other platforms. So Switch stuff, it's about 50-50, whether it's a
Hmm.
cart or a code in there. PC, I don't think anyone's put any PC games onto a CD or a Blu-ray or anything for years now. It's all just Steam or maybe Epic codes. Xbox and PlayStation tend to have discs, but of course you then pop those into the drive and get told, oh yeah, by the way, there's a 60 gig day one patch which you must apply, at which
Yeah.
point it may as well be digital anyway.
All right, folks, telling you now, your annual reminder, if you bought a console for Christmas, set it up now. Do not wait
Yeah.
until Christmas Day.
It is literally the equivalent of what we had when we were kids of there being no batteries for whatever toy had just been bought. It will be
Yeah.
a 4-day download on Christmas, unless you were lucky enough to have incredibly good internet.
Well, for reasons, we've finally decided to get a Nintendo Switch in my house. I know it's been around for a long time, but we decided it was time to go there. And I got a really good Black Friday deal. But the thing that it made me a bit uncomfortable about the bundle I got, it had Mario Kart 8 in it, which was one of the main reasons why we wanted it. But it was a digital copy. So I
Huh.
saved myself some money, but I don't have the physical little card to go in the Switch. And it was like if you'd offered me two versions of the bundle and one cost a few bucks more for the physical thing, I would have paid it. So I'm just a little bit nervous that somewhere down the track, you won't be able to get that back. Because I know we still play Mario Kart on the original Switch, which has got to be 15
The
years old or
original Wii,
whatever.
I think you mean.
The original Wii. We've really got to have bloody value out of that. So it makes me a little bit nervous that I don't have a physical copy of this game.
Look, we are getting, I think, sort of detouring here a bit, but all I will say is one of the great things about those gaming marketplaces in particular is a lot of the smaller publishers, they were never going to be able to afford the
Yeah.
printing of physical media and the distribution
Mm.
of it. And a lot of the games I love are from those smaller publishers. Switch in particular, West of Loathing and Shadows Over Loathing, they were never going to come out on a little kind of dinky, bitter tasting, oversized SD card. But they are games that I go back to over and over again. So I'm grateful for the fact that these digital marketplaces do exist.
So I want to ask why you know how they taste.
Oh, don't you remember? That was a really big deal.
Yeah, they're famously bitter. So
Oh
Adam,
no,
if
no,
you're,
it's
if you've got a
One
Switch game to hand, go and give it a quick slurp. You'll
Ooh,
find out very quickly.
good to know.
But I was gonna say, Adam, it is actually very hard to buy a Switch that doesn't come with a digital copy of Mario Kart 8 these days. It's much rarer to find one that doesn't have it.
Oh, okay.
But I think that the trap, especially for consoles with the digital marketplace, and you're right, Nick, there's a ton of great indie games out there that would not have instantly had them, although there are mobs, your limited run games and so on, who do sometimes do
Mm.
print runs of those kinds of games. The trap there, though, that we haven't seen, for example, with PC gaming, is it keeps costs really high too. An awful lot of those console specific games, the digital copies never see sales, whereas you do see the physical versions of those games often a lot cheaper.
Yeah, that is a really interesting point. I do keep an eye out for sale stuff, to be honest. So, I'm a cheapskate. I'm of that age where I literally
You're
look
a
at a game
journalist.
and
None of us are making
well,
fortunes.
none of us making fortunes, but also I spent too long in the
Mm.
I don't know, video game journalism industry that once I had to start paying for games, I was like, they cost how much? What?
The other thing, and they don't talk about this so much anymore, but one of the big things from the publisher's perspective, as soon as you move everything to digital, you pretty much eliminate the secondhand market. You eliminate the
Mm.
walking at EB Games and going through the used disc bin, which they hate because they don't get a cut of the gig there.
Which
And the loaning it to your mates
yeah.
market as well.
Mm.
I can't. You can't fling your copy of Mario Kart 8 my way, not that I need it, without throwing me your entire Switch, which I guess you're probably not willing to do. And I don't know if your arm's good enough to throw it from Melbourne to Sydney anyway.
Well, look, not to talk, not to devolve this into old gamers reminisce, but don't forget your Civic videos, your blockbusters, your whatever you had nearby you, the video Ezzies, they often had games you could rent for the weekend.
Yeah.
I played a lot of Shining Force 2 on the Sega, rented from Video Easy, and it was bloody great. And of course, that's gone all the way.
Yeah, my mates and I used to get a Super Nintendo and Mario Kart. Super Nintendo? Yeah. Hang on, my brain's just totally. Let me try that again. Mate
Welcome
and
to
I.
the Old Guys
Yeah.
Reminisce
So
About
good.
Technology
Super
podcast.
Nintendo and Street Fighter 2. Does that sound right?
Yes,
Super
it's
Nintendo,
exactly right, Adam.
Street Fighter 2 from the Civic video thing around the corner from my mate's place, and we would literally stay up all night and play it and then take it back the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, the secondhand market's probably a really big deal. I think, again, a lot of great DVDs, a lot of great Blu-rays to bring it back to this sort of stuff. I bought them secondhand. It was just burrowing through somewhere, found them, thought it was great, or a copy I hadn't seen for a while, or something I knew had only had a limited release. There was some great stuff around. So yeah, and I'm kind of curious, do either of you still have physical media that you've deliberately kept on to? I don't mean just, it's a box you haven't got around to sorting through, but is there physical media, whether it's games, movies, CDs, that you have deliberately hung on to?
Yes, in my case. Don't know
Big
about
yes in
Adam.
Alex's case. Me, yeah, deliberately is an interesting word. I've got a couple of boxes full of DVDs and Blu-rays that I have deliberately not thrown out or
Mm.
deliberately not given away, but that's not quite the same as deliberately hung on to. To be honest, there's not many of them that I dive into. But there was one situation recently where I wanted to show my kids Spinal Tap, and I ended up buying it on disc and getting it delivered because it was the only place I could find to watch it. I think it was Spinal
Mm.
Tap. So there are things like that. But I've got a lot. I look back now, how many movies we used to buy on Blu-ray that we just don't bother anymore. But
Mm.
being a tight ass and remembering being very aware of the conversation that we're having now is why I would not give away all of that stuff.
And look, I've got some DVDs and Blu-rays as well, which I have deliberately kept. Like, Monkey Bone. I know that,
Yeah.
the second best Brendan Fraser movie of the 90s is unlikely to end up on many streaming services. So you can pry that out of my cold, dead hands. I still have a cassette version of the Young Einstein soundtrack, which I think is the greatest Australian music soundtrack ever compiled. They are things. I've still got a VHS copy of Swingers, believe it or not. But anyway, that's just for nostalgia's sake. But there are just a few that when I've gone through, despite the fact I've moved in the past 5 years, 3 different states and multiple houses within all of them, I have hung onto them very, very deliberately.
Yeah.
See,
I've
I'm
got
probably the
Babylon
only person
5.
in this room who's bothered to actually buy physical media this year,
Yeah, you definitely are.
and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
but
Possibly
admittedly,
this country.
admittedly that's
Yes.
possibly too. Admittedly, that's Doctor Who. That's very specific stuff that I collect as well as watch and
Yeah.
Can you
enjoy.
get that
It's very
on
niche.
disc? Because it's like on Disney now. Will they, so after a certain period of time, will
So the
BBC release it?
I have written about this extensively,
Strangely
quite
enough.
recently, actually, to the shock of nobody.
This is what happens when you let Alex take over Gizmodo for the week.
Yeah, totally. Um, the new Disney stuff is getting a disc release, at least in the UK. It is not clear whether or not that's happening here. What I'm talking about is the much older Who stuff, which is now getting remastered Blu-ray releases with a bunch of extra content and the classic actors doing commentaries and stuff like that. Which, if you're a serious hardcore fan like I am, or possibly a tragic hardcore fan like I am, take your pick. Those are worth buying if you're interested. But beyond that, no, I don't particularly otherwise buy new content because it does sit there like that. And it is, I guess, it's more affordable in the sense of If it's something I only want to watch once or twice, then fine. It can sit on a streaming service. I'll watch it my once or twice and then I'm good. But if it's something that I know I want access to, as you were alluding to, Nick, stuff that's not necessarily going to get released or might be on streaming and get removed. We saw this with Disney actually with that Willow TV series, which I kept on meaning to watch, thinking, oh, yeah, that could probably be enjoyable. They had that for like 6 months and they've yanked it. It's gone.
Mm.
They just made the choice of, oh, we don't want to pay actor residuals, basically. And it's no longer there. So, in fact, the only way, as far as I'm aware, you could do that would be to hoist the mainsail and
Take it
sail the
that
seas
way.
of
Look,
piracy.
a weird sort of side anecdote on this while we're talking physical media. I had a wonderful artist from the Shepparton region called Tennille McKenzie in studio recently to do a bit of live music. And she talked about getting into the studio and wanting to do a physical EP for the first time in her career. She's always released for streaming. And for her, it was not necessarily about what it would mean in terms of sales or anything like that. But for her as a musician, it felt a little bit special. People had reached out and said, we'd love to actually own what you have. And I think, there's an aspect of that for the artist as well, to be able to have on any level, and I made this moment while holding it. I kind of really like that.
Well, that just about wraps up this week's special episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Nick for joining us this week.
My pleasure. Have me back anytime.
And while we no longer do the 3 questions of doom, you do now get this chance to promote whatever you like, where you work, a website, an app, which of your cats you like best, as well as where folks can find you on the social media of your choice.
That is very cruel because I love all of my cats equally. Even the one who's been making cameos. Thank you, Lola. You've been lovely. Look, I do the breakfast show on ABC Shepparton. You can get me via the ABC Listen app. You'll hear me nationally for a little bit over the Christmas break when I fill in on Australia All Over on a Sunday morning. And you'll also catch me on the Victorian show, The Conversation Hour, usually on a Wednesday. And I'll be filling in on that for the second half of January as well. And much as I hate to say it, I've pretty much almost entirely given social media the flick. I feel like I'm an ex-refugee now and don't really know where I've landed. But hunt me down on Instagram if you want to see photos of her.
He's pointing to
Nick
his
has
cat.
Well, I'm pointing to my cat. Sorry, I'm pointing to my
adorable.
Just so
cat.
you know.
I would say the best cats. I'm going to go with the second best cats, but that's because I have cats and I've got a natural bias there. Awesome, awesome animals in any case. And as always, you can catch us at the Vertical Hold webpage on Facebook, on Instagram. You can look up Adam and me on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or Threads, or if it's not a flaming heap of garbage, no wait, it still totally
Still
is,
is.
on Twitter/X.
Thanks everyone for dropping by, and let us know what your thoughts are on digital purchases, if you're still hanging on to your analog your physical media, and what your plans are for content around Christmas.